and welcome to the third episode of the Creative Alabama podcast. I'm Josh Hamilton. I first heard of Huntsville hip-hop artist King Kwofi from an article on AL.com back in 2019. It was 12 recent Alabama-made songs you should hear by Matt Wake. It featured a few artists that were not a surprise, like John Paul White and A.A. Bondi. But then I listened to a song called Cobain by King Kwofi, and it got stuck on repeat in my head. This past summer, I had the chance to meet Kwofi and do a video profile on him for my day job at This Is Alabama. But I'm happy now to have him on the podcast so we could have a longer conversation about his work. During the interview, we talk about his latest EP, Get Home Safe, and the special significance each track and their titles hold. We talk about Kwofi's influences, and we even talk about mental health and physical health and how they're connected. So thanks for tuning in. Here's my chat with King Kwofi. Hey, Kwofi.
Josh, what's good?
How's it going, man?
I'm well, man. We're just hanging out.
Cool. So thanks for agreeing to come onto the podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just going to dive in. Is that cool?
Let's do it, man. Yeah.
I was going to ask you a bit about your latest EP, Get Home Safe. What can you tell me about that? How's that been going?
Wow, man. That was a journey for me. It's the middle of the pandemic. I had a lot of time on my hands because my 9 to 5, they sent us home for safety. And I was sitting around with my family and just looking at what was happening, what was going on. And the art that I was making, I was just kind of being faced with, was I giving myself, fully to it? So I explored some different approaches, which really had me dive into myself and my artistic expression and start to kind of, I wouldn't say rethink, but just reapproach how I presented myself. And I was challenged really to look at the art first and reapproach it, and then attach its meaning to, because really the way I was doing things before, I had my meaning first. I had my reason,
right?
And I would approach the art with that reason in mind, and then I would make the art. But this time it was make the art first, step back. What do I see? And when I got done, what you get is a collection of different experiences, and I put them all together and called it Get Home Safe.
Yeah. So I noticed that all the song titles have a time of the evening. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. What was that? What was that choice about?
It's a cryptic yet very overt message. I guess that's a contradiction, but either way, my whole point. Those times correlate with times of death.
Okay. For
5 innocent Black people at the hands of police.
Okay.
And so specifically, there are specific names involved. The only catch is I didn't want the names to become more important than the art or even the message. So to me, the timing was more of a subtle, like I wanted to get here and really, to be honest, what I'm doing is I'm saying that if you could meet any of these people 15 minutes or so before they met this death, who would you meet?
Right. What
would be their personality type? And so in my expression, what I feel like I'm giving you is an expression of who these people are. So Get Home Safe 1202 for me is Michael Brown.
Okay.
When I see his story and I read about the young man before he met the police officer, is a bold young man, someone who was willing to stand up for himself and to look out into the world and look at what was important to him. And there's a lot of us that just have a problem doing that. To me, from my perspective, there's some of us that have a problem looking out and saying, this is what I want. So tell me when it's my time.
Right.
And I'm gonna go ahead and get it. So each of those names, 1202, to directly answer your question, 1202 is Mike Brown, 846 is the time associated, of course, with George Floyd. Get Home Safe 1 p.m. is associated to the time and death of Ahmaud Arbery. Get Home Safe 1243 is associated with Breonna Taylor. And Get Home Safe 937 is associated with Philando Castile, who was shot in front of his daughter.
Wow.
That's what those times mean.
Okay.
And if you listen to the lyrics that's what I'm expressing. That's who I'm expressing as I see myself in every single one of those people.
I thought there was a deeper meaning there. Thank you for elaborating on that.
You know me.
Yeah. I was actually listening to it, and I noticed that I think it's the 12:02 p.m. That was the song you were first kind of working out when I was with you back in July,
Yeah.
interviewing you for This Is Alabama, the profile we did for you on This Is Alabama.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to hear, the pieces you were the fragments you were starting with, and then, how it came out in the end. That was, it was really cool. It was really cool to be there in the studio with you guys that day and listen to that, and then totally fleshed out. So for those that might not know, tell us a little bit about what you do. Do you consider yourself a rapper, an artist, R&B, like hip hop as a little bit of everything? How would how do you define yourself?
At the moment, I define myself as a hip hop artist.
Okay.
Hip hop is a culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lifestyle.
Sure.
I believe that I abide or I live close to the culture, and I always have kind of seen things through those lenses. But I'm also a musician, and so I get music. I understand the mathematical approach to it and the artistic approach to it. But I understand and I flesh it out my own way.
Okay.
As it pertains to what I'm exploring now, as I'm releasing this rap music, it's just my artistic expression, and it's just how I see fit to kind of release it. Who knows what'll come out?
Right.
As we keep exploring.
When did you first catch the music bug? Like, what was your first experience? Kind of like.
Oh man, as a kid, bro. As a kid, just because we had music making equipment around the house all the time. For me, just growing up, I grew up around pianos and organs, and grandma there was at least a piano in the house at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not that piano was necessarily used for family gatherings and all that, I'll tell you now, we didn't sit around the piano and sing songs and things like that. But as kids, it was one of the stops you made along your day as you look, for things to do around the house after school or summers. We were outside, we go to the beach, go to see friends, some street football, and you got to play the piano and watch some TV, stuff like that. So I caught the bug back then, just about creating music, learning how to take a tape player and play something on one end, and then rewind it back and play again, and just figuring out how to take musical elements and throw them together, and always being interested in loops. I always had this interest in taking something 4 bars and just over and over, just that repetitive sound made the most sense to me. But growing up and then coming up in my musical journey, a lot of folks were like, hey, these sound like beats. So, instead of just feeling total discouragement, I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that's what you call these. These are beats. So that was my music. That's my musical journey, man, as a kid. Into right after high school, I just caught the bug, man. I just knew I had a Yamaha SY77 around the house that I would make little tracks with. And I'd already declared I wanted to do music production. So I just really haphazardly jumped into that for a couple of years, and it showed some promise. So I stuck with it.
It's funny you were talking about playing with like tape recorders and stuff, because I did that too when I was probably like in 9th or 10th grade. I would take little tape recorders, and I would play like a guitar riff and record it through the little stupid little plastic mic that was on the tape recorder, and then take another tape recorder and play that, and then play like a bass line or something.
Absolutely.
But by the time I was finished, like adding vocals or something, the tape was so fuzzy.
So much noise.
It's like you couldn't really.
Right.
It's like there's a song in there somewhere. Just listen for it.
Yeah.
You're up in the Huntsville area.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
Right now, it's almost non-existent because I'm here, but I am hiding. I've been hanging out with my family, man. I've been working out every day. I've been really just trying to lend myself to creativity, spending time with my kids. My kids are just, they're so creative. And just watching them grow up, and I'm helping create my art like around that, like the freedom of expression for my daughter and my son. And I got an oldest, man, and just their freedom, their idea of what, my oldest son turns 18 this year, and just what he wants to do in fashion and what he sees and how he sees things. So as I'm approaching my art, there's all the different things that an artist is plagued with when wanting to express themselves, and the different things that would say, no, you can't do this, or why would you do that, and whatever that is. I've been really just engulfing myself around my family because they are living expressions of why not.
Right.
When you sit back and look at your kids, they kind of are they kind of help answer the questions for, I got some new songs I want to drop. They got a different vibe to them. I don't know if people are gonna really rock with it, but then my daughter comes through and she's just, she's trying to dress herself and nothing matches, and it's pink and it's blue and it's brown and purple, and I'm like, okay, yeah, why not? What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So aside from that, I go out every once in a while, pick up something, try to bring it back. We really promote physical health around the house and just making sure that everybody's eating right, and we got the vitamins going.
Sure.
And my wife is sure to keep everybody stocked on the vitamins and stuff. So we've been blessed not to have COVID run through our house yet and be affected like that.
Okay, that's good.
But we're trying to make sure that we don't affect anybody else too. So we're just staying safe in the sense of just staying healthy as much as we can and not going crazy.
Oh man, yeah. Does the exercise, the working out, does that help you kind of maintain your sanity?
Absolutely. I mean, so much so that now I'm, and I do crazy stuff anyway. I do CrossFit. So I'm already crazy in that I'm going and doing that. Now I'm like every day. I can't, I have a running appointment and I'm in the gym, man, hours at a time seems like. So, I have to, for two reasons, not just, COVID season and everything that's going on in the world, but for me, I find that physical exercise helps push mental barriers.
Okay.
So it's a philosophy of mine. When you're stuck on something mentally, find something physical to accomplish, and that way, we turn those synapses on in the brain that allow us to find success in the things that we need to do.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. Like, feeling low, you go work out, go exercise, and suddenly, like, things aren't so tough. Like, you can
right?
you can kind of work through it, figure it out. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, you work with your buddy, your producer.
Yeah, Kelvin.
I always want to call him Kevin for some reason. I want to leave out the L.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been working together, and how did that relationship start?
Wow, man. It's I don't remember not working with Kelvin. It's funny because we go back to those high school times for me. So I didn't meet Kelvin in music until well after I had already determined in my mind what I was going to do.
Okay.
And so, my story with Kelvin goes that I had already kind of built my own home recording setup. I had already kind of dedicated myself to this lifestyle and had already invested thousands of dollars in equipment. And I have an older brother that's also into production, really works heavy on like gospel and inspirational music. And he and Kelvin were working on something because Kelvin's multifaceted.
Right.
And Kelvin needed help on a piece of equipment. So my brother called me, and Kelvin in excitement is like, yo, we got to link up. Now, mind you, at this time, I had never, even though he's a friend of my brother's, I hadn't met him.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and I are about 7 years apart. So I don't, it's not like we got the same friends. So Kelvin sends out an invite, and the rest is history. After that invite, we just hit it off. This is, man, I feel like it's about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So after that, we just always had a unique style because his way of mentorship, or just his way of just guiding me, wasn't like, hey, sit down, let me teach you a lesson. It was, play for me what you got. Play your stuff. And he, his reactions and his excitement will kind of lead you along the right way. Okay, I need to keep doing that, or I shouldn't do that as much, or how would you do that? And, questions like that. But he was just real transparent about his journey. And he started talking to me about, who he had been working with, and not everybody. Just he would always mention the important lessons for him, and any lesson he learned from working out in LA or working with Raphael Sadiq and these big names, he just gave it. Like, hey man, this is what I learned when I did this. This is the kind of money I looked at, whatever. This is how I learned these lessons. So I would just hold him in deep. And then, as time goes on, you grow, things change, and as things change, we adjust and we learn to be there for each other and look out for each other. And before I knew it, we rarely even do music when we get together. We talk for so long.
Right.
Because it's just friends getting together. It's like, oh, by the way, we got some music we need to do. So yeah, that's kind of how we operate on that.
That's the best kind of partnership.
I think so too.
Do you ever do live performances? I mean, before COVID, was that a thing that you ever got out to do?
That was the plan, man. Before COVID, it was really about hitting these live performances. It's on the way. I think too, we're just trying to readjust and make sure. Because one of the things I think is important for my artists, I believe my artists to be experienced. And there's little layers of stuff. Even if you look at it as simple, it's like, okay, this is just some hip hop. But no, it's not just. There's a little bit more in there. And I believe the experience will help uncover that. Mm-hmm. So, we're working on reimagining how we can present that to people. But I believe you'll see something from me pretty soon, and a lot more. So that, because I think, especially in my hometown, in my home area, I want people to really be able to experience what I'm trying to say.
I've honestly been missing going to concerts. I didn't get out a lot, but
yeah,
I'm kind of missing that communal experience of listening to live music.
There's now an invisible barrier between all of us. Nobody wants this. I want to share this experience with you, but I don't want to share it enough to affect your entire family and your well-being and all that stuff. So
exactly,
yeah, we just got to rethink how we do it.
I was curious: is there a hip hop scene in Huntsville or in North Alabama? And if there is, like, where are some of the places one might be able to experience a hip hop show, and who are some of the other people performing?
Yeah, absolutely. Huntsville, North Alabama area's got a lot to offer. Right now, I believe most of the artists that I could think of off the top of my head have already found ways, even small ways, to help host this experience. So we're finding little coffee shops and little open areas, outdoorsy type areas that are coming up in Huntsville right now. So like the camp, you could find a show every so often at the camp. And right now the live musician scene is also being bred into that, which I love because that's my favorite. You got Way Brown and Enrique, dope artists, beyond the scope of just North Alabama, but really representing the North Alabama sound. There's a number of spots that are kind of outdoorsy and they're still kind of showing things. And a number of artists that are adding their face to that. As far as hip hop and just saying, like a total hip hop scene, I still think we're building that. Okay. There's some folks that would beg to differ and say it's here already. Mm-hmm. But when I think of scene, I think of a spot that kind of like you can stick a quarter in and it can continue to regenerate and continue. I don't think you can really do that. You once the admission goes in, and that's it for about three weeks or so, and then we'll start it again. So to me, that's not really a scene. But there are a number of acts from the city that are really doing their thing. And I think you can definitely enjoy that too.
Have you found that Huntsville is pretty supportive of that kind of music in your work?
From an artistic standpoint, I don't think your hometown is ever, I think it's the way it's designed, so I'm into this book called The War of Art.
Okay.
I really just feel like, and just one of my interpretations of resistance, I just look at the city that you're from, and it's almost as if that I think of it like that topsoil that you got to get through to really bloom. So support from your hometown is kind of an oxymoron for me. Like I don't, not that the hometown doesn't support you. I think on both ends. I think sometimes artists, and I'll include myself on this, because I'm from the city and because I live in the city, being on the scene for me, right? It's like every place is hometown. I live here. I'm on the scene. I'm on the scene from being in my house. And it was like, no, you're not. You're not being on the scene. I'm a homebody. So it's a tough one for me because being out and being on the scene with stuff that you kind of places you grew up being around and kind of seeing. It's twofold. So I wouldn't say that they don't support.
Right.
A lot of times as artists, we can do a better job of letting our city know how they can support.
Sure.
And to be honest, one of the ways in which I try to tell my city to support me is through merch.
Okay.
And I believe that the city's been really supportive that way.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So that merch is available at kingkwofi.com.
kingkwofi.com.
Nice. Speaking of like home, your hometown where you grew up, did you grow up in Huntsville?
So I was an Army brat. So
Okay.
I got to move a bunch of different places. I was referencing Florida earlier. My grandmother originally is from South Florida.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time, elementary years, South Florida. I finished up in Huntsville, go back and forth from Germany, Kansas. From high school on, I've been here. So,
Okay.
I planted my feet right after high school, got out into the world and tried to learn the world without reading the manual.
Right.
And here we are.
We'll be back with more Creative Alabama after a short break. And we're back with more King Kwofi. How did you decide that you were going to pursue music? Because, in my experience of pursuing creative things, like it's hard to get family to believe in what you want to do as much as you want to do it. So what was the sort of the aha moment where you're like, I'm going to do this, and really go for it?
And that's actually where my rebellious streak comes in. I'm a rebel specifically at unseen forces. I'm one of those kind of shadow fighters that's fighting paradigms and ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And so I was a little different already because I just didn't see it the way my family saw it. I didn't see anything the way they saw it. I saw certain things as opportunities. Mm-hmm. I learned what to do in certain rooms and certain places, but just, I just always would abide by the time and place. Artistically, I just always thought that the journey to learning who I was artistically was a spiritual one, okay. And I was supposed to do it. Like I had to, it's my duty to go through and find out all these little spaces and places and ideas that show up in my mind, and I'm supposed to speak them, talk them out, and discuss them amongst friends and family and mentors. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to put it on, make it musical, put it down, give it to you, mm-hmm. let you do with it whatever you will. So I made a decision early. The problem is that decision has to be made over and over and over again. That decision gets made probably 365 times a year.
Sure.
So for artists, and I think that allowing myself to see my artistry change, to see it be different, and to be okay with the idea of it doing something different, and not because of a trend or not because it needed to happen to make some type of money or something mm-hmm. like that, but because it was a natural progression of what was inside of me. And so 2017 UC was a long time of me deciding, hey, I'm an artist and I'm going to continue. And so it's been tough for me because I suffer from the ideas and how I was introduced to hip hop. Mm-hmm. I don't really fit the mold of what I believe I was introduced to. Okay. I was introduced to younger guys that had this kind of money and they looked this way and this, that, and the third. And so that entire paradigm mm-hmm. is what I match up in my head. So I'm fighting that every day, and just accepting that, no, artists don't look like that. They look like this. They look like guys with a black beanie on and a black t-shirt and black jeans because and a beard that's got gray in it. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, who told you it's not? So I repeat that over and over. So it's a constant decision.
It sounds like a little bit of what you're talking about is the pitfall of comparison. Comparing yourself to what other people are doing. And
it's, and just based on the world that we built here, it's a pitfall that's kind of like a wide net for any and everybody. There's no respect of people. Like it's coming for you. So I just fight it every day.
One of the things that I asked previous guest, one of my first guests on the podcast, is just about creative insecurity and when you're kind of doubting yourself and what you're up to. Do you ever experience something like that, or do you?
Yes. I'm infected with it, bro. Like, I deal with it a lot, but luckily for me, I got a really good support system. I actually got an amazing support set up at home in the sense that, like, my wife has always been available to help me navigate those murky waters in my own mind, and that's just our relationship. So long before being my wife, just that's who she is to her own community. She's just that support. She's a healer. I just think that was what she was born to do. So I was blessed enough to have somebody who will put me back into the fight. Yeah, just, I understand you feel tired, but get back over there. There's something that's coming up. Watch out for it. And then you come back victorious, and it's like, yeah, I told you. She just pushed. So I think everybody needs that in their corner.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes you got to find that dog. You got to find that fight. And I think that's where the physical side comes in for me. So and going back to that physical gym piece, like I learned how to put the dog in the fight just by getting in there, lifting something heavy, doing some things that I didn't think I could do. I go to the gym, man. I got like a 500-pound deadlift. So,
wow.
You do that a couple times in your mind. It's like, what the hell else can you not do? Like, it's just, what else is, you need me to remove a refrigerator? Okay, cool. I'll do that for you. Like, it's like simple tasks become easy. And I think the same thing artistically. Like, I get back into artistic mode, and my brain's like, why not? What can't you do? And so I try to recharge with those types of things. And that way, when I do meet those insecurities, I at least got something I can tell them.
Yeah, I love diving into that kind of stuff. Like, your mind can turn against you sometimes if you let it. So yeah,
absolutely, absolutely, and it will too. That's like one of the biggest pitfalls. It takes a lot of us a long time to find out that was our mind in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So talk to me about some of your influences, not necessarily, Alabama based, but what are some of the things that really planted the seed for you musically to really get you involved?
There's a couple images in my mind. When my mom and dad were together, they had a record collection that they would play for, like, I don't know if it was special occasions, but there was certain things that they would play around the house. Stevie Wonder. My mom had a Roberta Flack album. And then they had a lot of gospel. My mom listened to a lot of gospel. Gospel played a lot in our house, and just a lot of soul and R&B. That was one major influence, just that record collection that they would keep. And then, of course, just having the musical instruments, just knowing that I could create. I never walk into a creative space not thinking I could create something and create anything, right? Whether or not I think it'll be good. Going back to that comparison piece, right? But coming up in late 90s, looking at what music was doing at that time in the early 2000s, I came across the name Jay Dilla. And this was after a time where, I believed that if you were sampling records, you were probably doing it wrong, and that, everything should be done with musical instruments. And that's real music and, all this other weird stuff. And in my musical journey, I had a scenario where, man, I would always take I bought all these keyboards, man. I had so much gear, and I would always find a reason to either sell or pawn this gear, for money reasons. I just didn't always have my money stuff together. That would leave me without equipment when I was being creative. I didn't have all my stuff. And one day, man, the only thing I had was this stupid drum machine I bought that I thought would help me just, sync all my music together. It's called an MPC.
Okay.
And that's all I had, and a MIDI keyboard that was fairly new at the time, because MIDI was useful, obviously, but we hadn't gotten into the boom of consumer music age, like 2000s and whatnot yet. Sure. So that's all I had, and some old CDs of some Satchmo, and I relearned making music by reconstructing what had already been done in sampling, and that really changed my mind. That really changed my thought process. So when I got to listening to Dilla and Slum Village and what he had done with Erykah Badu and his approach to production, and then seeing how he was breaking down records to do that, it just really changed my thought process. So I reapproached production from a different thought process then, and that really boosted my interest in the art.
That's great. And what time frame was that around?
So that's early 2000s, man. I'm in the Dilla maybe around 04.
Okay.
Till his death and beyond. I mean, till this day, Dilla changed my life. So
I noticed back in the summer while I was at the Sidewalk Film Festival, and the video for Salute that you made with
Ben.
Yeah, the video that you made with Ben Stark had been accepted and played on one of the drive-in screens.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I know that video.
Yeah, and what was cool is just seeing it on the big screen. Most of the times at these screenings, and that was a new world for me. Like I hadn't been to film festivals before the King Kwofi work, and so Ben really introduced me to the film festivals. And he's like, this is a different way of doing it. But because I'm so artistic, I want to see a story being told. So, it just worked together, and it was great to see it out there. I think that's the second or third time we've been to Sidewalk Film Festival for a music video. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So for those who might not have seen it, can you tell us a little bit about the sort of story that you guys were trying to tell with that video?
Overall, I don't think there's much interpretation. I think there's a slight bit of space that you can interpret something on. But just to tell you my take on it, we're introducing a different concept where, I'm literally saying what it is that I would like to see for not only myself, but for my people in general. Just, I'd rather the acknowledgement and the respect of not only a person, but someone who's maybe fought, bled, and died, or contributed, right? I'd rather the salute than the lies. But what you get to see in the storyline is, I come in to help or to add my 2 cents into a dispute. Mm-hmm. There's an altercation with the law. There's a knee-jerk reaction, which leads to, an innocent man being shot. But the innocent man rises up from being shot, And I think what Ben and I are saying in this space is, what's the extent of what needs to happen for us to see something that needs to change, right? Mm-hmm. If I was to rise a man up from the grave and show him to you like a miracle, would that be enough for you to stop hating people? Or would you just go on about your day and we keep doing the same thing? Yeah. Another thing that Ben is saying as well is, how many of these do we have to go through? We just buried one last week. There's so many that we don't know about. And it's almost as if we'll forget, we'll stop talking about this in 2 weeks from now. We'll walk away and we'll go home and somebody's gotta keep their finger on the button or keep pressure on the topic.
Yeah. It's a very poignant video and, unfortunately right on time,
Yeah.
when you came out with it. One of my favorite songs of yours is Cobain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like, that's the one that always plays over and over in my head when I start thinking about your work. And I was thinking about some of the lyrics, and I got one written down here. For my freedom, for our freedom, your children will make amends. And I was thinking about that, and I was wondering, my interpretation of that is, future generations are gonna be working for racial reconciliation. And it'll be our future, our kids that sort of fix this problem. Is that what you meant? Or can you sort of elaborate on that, or am I?
I think you're dead on. One thing we talk about in my house a lot is future generations. One of my wife's favorite quotes is "unto the third and fourth generation." So I think that there's decisions that we make today that will affect those that come behind us. In that moment, if I'm honest with you, I was really unapologetic about the idea that, there's one rhetoric that allows us to kind of not take ownership of what's happened previously because, hey, it wasn't me. I didn't do that. But it's weird because when it's positive, there's something that we can take. So, My grandfather, I didn't work for an inheritance, but my grandfather did, and I get to take it, and it's mine, right? And so we
Right.
accept that, but
Sure.
something negative. Nobody wants to bill after, grandpa, racked up the T-Mobile bill and then passed. Unfortunately, it's like, yeah, that sucks. But man, why do you have to rack up $1,500 on his? Who did he call? What are we
Right.
doing? Can y'all please help us out on this? I feel like that's kind of what's happening. Like there's a bill that's been given to previous generations of slave owners and decision makers and cohorts and people who were shipping boat departments and it's not necessarily a violent one. I think it's just one of ownership, one of where now we're after the dollar, we're after progress, and I think for some of us progress will be stunted because there's some amends that need to be made. They don't necessarily have to be racial, like, hey, go outside and find a black guy and give him a hug type of thing. Just more
Right.
like, we built a really solid foundation, so to speak, economically in the country. I think there's a need to discuss how, like,
Sure.
okay, this is how we built it, and then there's a need to at least create an avenue where it gets distributed openly and evenly. But either way, I think it's going to happen. I think is my point in that lyric. I think that's bound to happen now, because for me, I vow to make me, my people, my family, so much more poised and educated on a subject of bettering themselves and prosperity for themselves, that no matter what the holdup is, like, race won't be one of them ever again. Not for us. We'll take what's ours. So that's kind of where I'm at.
There's a couple other lyrics I really like in that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Shining on my haters. Shining on my haters. It feels like this is a song about a lot about inner growth and inner peace and the quest for those things. You
Yeah.
talk about Nirvana, but then you also
Yeah.
mentioned Kurt Cobain. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it about personal growth, or again, am I projecting my own?
You caught it, man. I mean, I think it's right up your alley. See, you get it. No, man, that's exactly, and that's what most of my music stems from. It's mostly the internal fight, and I'm recognizing that I'm worth it. I'm recognizing that I'm worthy, right? And so I'm saying, watch me. You said this wasn't gonna happen, but watch this. It's my two, and you might have said, you might not have thought that I could do this, but watch, hold my beer, sort of thing. And and on top of that, I mentioned the Kurt Cobain because I mentioned if you haven't already have been created into this type of version of yourself, it's gonna take some growth, and that growth is a little painful. It's not a cakewalk,
Sure.
to face yourself and want to and demand more of yourself than what you're providing.
Absolutely. That's a message I can get down with. I think that's about all the time I really wanted to take of yours. I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is what's your advice for not just musicians that are trying to get in this, but just artists in general? What's some sort of, do you have an inspirational mantra that you might be able to share, or any kind of wisdom?
Right now, the best thing I can share. One of my best friends has a quote, and it's "Done is better than perfect," and that's something that I've adopted because it wasn't mine to begin with. He gave it to me a couple of times, over and over again, and I've learned to kind of remind myself. Right now is the time to really just create. It's the time to make. If you're in a spot where you're thinking about where the art's going to go and how it's going to be distributed, you might be putting the cart before the horse.
Okay.
And I really think that a lot of us as creatives have to take the time to do the work to complete the projects. Get it done. Stop looking to make sure that everything's perfect on it. Right. Get it done. And then what can happen is we can sit back and look at 12 pieces, right? 12 songs, and pick between those 12s, which the best are, and perfect those so that we can distribute them.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for your time, Kwofi.
Man, I thank you for reaching out, Josh. It's been a pleasure.
Take care and have a nice week.
Yeah, man, be safe.
That's our show. You can find King Kwofi's EP, Get Home Safe, on iTunes and Spotify. You can also find his merch and music at kingkwofi.com. Thanks for listening to Creative Alabama. Subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Creative Alabama. You can also find us on creativealabama.com. See you next time. Hope you spend the rest of the week creating something of your own.